How do pop artists use simple chords to create such powerful songs? It's actually because the chords are so simple. And you, yes, you, can learn to wield the power like Taylor Swift, Benson Boone and many others do in their songs. My songwriting professor showed me it's not even that difficult. At the end of this video you'll know all you need to know in order to do this, and I'll have you practicing the application. Let's go! If you missed last week's video, no problem, click the pop-up to watch it, but you don't need it to follow this lesson. I told my viewers to name these chords, but there's actually something odd going on here. A chord is 1, 3, 5. But these chords are 5, 1, 3, and this chord is 3, 5, 1. A chord is built off of its root, but you don't need to use that exact order of notes, and you can even double notes. So this is C major, and this, all just C's, E's and G's, nothing else. But why? Why would you do this? I'll tell you all about it, but first listen to this. These chords are all in root position. It has a certain sound. Now let's compare it to what happens if we use inversions to try and let every note move as little as possible. See? Take this voice for example. It stays really close. Take the next one. The next one. Now what actually happens is that we treat each note as a voice, like in a choir, and we're letting each voice move as little as possible, giving us the most subtle transition between chords that we can create. This is called voice leading and sounds really smooth. Although that's not better than using strictly root positions, it's just different. And it's easier to play since my hands don't need to jump all over the place. It just stays real close instead of moving up and down. We want to look into this more deeply, which brings us to complementary intervals, which is a big name for something rather simple. Let's take a look at the interval of C going up to E. Count it out for yourself, answer in 3, 2, 1. It's a major third. It's 2 whole tones and that's a major third. Now, what's the distance from C down to E? What would that be? Count it down again, 3, 2, 1. The answer is, it's a minor sixth. Now one way you can calculate this is look at the E major scale. Then you add all the accidentals, which is of course F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp. You know C sharp would be the major sixth. In a major scale we've got a major sixth. C sharp is the major sixth. That means C is the minor sixth. This is one way you can calculate it. Another way is knowing your pattern of whole tone, semitone, whole, semitone. If you know that pattern, then you know that after the fifth, we usually get a whole tone. And knowing the fifth up from E to B, that's one of the reasons you want to learn your triads. You want to know these things. You want to know what the thirds and what the fifths are. Because once you know those, you can find all the other notes in the scale much easier, much faster. Okay, so what we want to know about this is this. When we're turning the bottom note into the top note, we are inverting the interval. Okay, that's a complementary interval. These two intervals are complementary. Imagine we're doing this with the tonic and the octave. We get 1 and 8. If we turn the bottom note into the top note and the other way around, we still have 1 and 8. Remember this, 1 plus 8 equals 9. And we've got the same thing here. Here, 3 plus 6 equals 9. Try it with any set of intervals, you will always end up at 9. You can pause the video and calculate it for yourself. If you're not sure about this yet, maybe you should just pause the video and calculate it for yourself, and then we'll continue. Now the only other thing you need to know is that a major interval will invert to a minor interval. These are always complementary, so the minor third's complementary interval is the major sixth. The minor seventh has the major second as its complementary interval, and minor second, major seventh. Oh, and perfect intervals convert to perfect intervals, like the tonic converting to the octave, the fourth converts to the fifth. They're just perfect intervals, nothing to think about. That means we get these intervals. Now a very specific one to keep in mind is this one. The fourth inverting to the fifth. It immediately tells you which note is the root of a triad. If we got a fourth somewhere, then we now know that this is actually 1, 3, 5. It's the fifth, but it's been inverted, right? Normally 1 up to 5, but now we got 5 up to 1. And so that distance is an inverted fifth. It's a fourth. So in a triad you can spot the root by spotting the fourth. Or either it's in root position and then the root is the bottom note, or the fourth tells you where the root is. And that helps you identify the chord much quicker. You don't need to calculate every single note and then add it all up and find the 1, 3, 5. You just know which is the root and you're done. Audio issues and a haircut later, I now look like this. Okay, we've inverted intervals. Time to invert chords. Root position is 1, 3, 5. Now, if we go to the first inversion, we take the bottom note and move it to the top. So that gives us 3, 5, 1. And that's first inversion. Obviously, second inversion will give us the 3 at the top, creating 5, 1, 3. And that's the inversions. This is what you could play with your right hand on the piano on the top 3 or 4 strings in your guitar. However, do not underestimate the power of bass notes. The bass determines the entire context of the chord. We'll dive deeper into this when we start to discuss more complex harmony, but for now, know that the bass note can be the root, but it can also be the third or the fifth of the chord. Now, bass notes typically do not voice lead. If you move from C major to F major, the bass plays C and then plays F. No voice leading. Because voice leading means moving as little as possible, not more than one whole tone. So either the note stays the same, or it's a semitone, or it's a whole tone. But jumping up a fourth, that's not voice leading, so the bass typically does not voice lead. However, if you do voice lead the bass, it can create some interesting results. And this is how you end up with the third or fifth in the bass. Now the chord inversions do not refer to this bass note. It refers to the right hand of the piano, and the bass note is the left hand of the piano. However, they are sometimes conflated. They sometimes are used interchangeably. Slash chords and inversions. Anyway, this would make this C major. That will be C over E, with the third being the lowest note. And this would be C over G. And if you would notate it in the numbering system using Roman numerals, you would get 1, or 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, but you would get a Roman numeral. Then this would be a Roman numeral over 3 and a Roman numeral over 5. Roman numerals indicate chords. Arabic numerals, the 3 and the 5 here, indicate separate notes. In this case, the bass note indicated by the slash. Okay, so now we know some things you can do vertically with how you stack the notes on top of each other. But you can also think horizontally. And voice leading is a way of thinking horizontally, but there's more we can think about. And the first thing I want to teach you has to do with harmonic rhythm. Harmonic rhythm has to do with how often the chords change. Do you get one chord per measure, which is a pretty typical way of going about this? Or do you play 2 chords per measure? Or 1 chord per 4 measures, just staying on this chord for a pretty long time, then suddenly changing? Whichever harmonic rhythm you have, changing the harmonic rhythm creates contrast. Okay. Now, if you change chords once per measure for say 32 measures, just a long time, 1 chord per measure, and then suddenly you don't change chords, that's a surprise. You are expecting something to change and it doesn't, creating this sort of uneasy tension since we're staying somewhere where you're really expecting to go somewhere. So that's also a way to create contrast, to surprise the listener by not changing. Okay, I'll give you some examples to check out. Taylor Swift's Cruel Summer changes chords twice per measure in the verse, but once per measure in the chorus, creating a bit more breathing room for the chords and the melody to shine. Or check out Benson Boone's Beautiful Things, which changes chords twice per measure until the end of the verse, where it suddenly changes chords once per beat, so that's 4 times per measure in a 4/4 time signature. And then on the very last line of the verse, it just stays on 1 chord for a whole measure, another chord for a whole measure. So this creates a lot of contrast. First you got 2 per measure, then suddenly 4 per measure, then 1 per measure. So speeding up and slowing down before we land into the pre-chorus and the chorus, where we go back to 1 chord per measure, but now the instrumentation changes, the drums kick in, the rhythm of the song changes, and we move to a full band. Well, the chorus. Go and listen to it, check it out, and let me know what you learned from this in the comments below. Now the second concept is harmonic momentum. Now honestly, I don't know the official word for it, if there even is one, because this is kind of a weird concept. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of any of this before, but I call it harmonic momentum. And it has to do with how the roots between 2 chords relate to each other. So we can move in 3 ways. We can move in seconds, we can move in thirds, Or we can move in fourths. Why not in fifths, sixths or sevenths? Well, because of complementary intervals. When we move in seconds, we can go up in seconds, which is the same as going down in sevenths. Or we can go down in seconds, which is the same as going up in sevenths. So there's really just 2, 3 and 4, because 5, 6 and 7 are the inverted ones, the complementary intervals like you learned before. Anyway, we got movement in seconds. We've got movement in thirds and movement in fourths. So this might be C, D minor, E minor. And what you get when you look at this, you see C, E, G, and it has the voice lead to D, F, A. Each note changes. Every single note has to change. And so this creates a lot of momentum. Moving up to E minor, we still get the same thing. E, G, B, again, every note has to change because the roots are moving up in seconds. Every single note has to change in order to accommodate that change in chords. And this creates a lot of motion with a lot of momentum. Okay? Movement in fourths is the most typical movement, the one that's used most often. It sounds very powerful, yet stable. And this is because if you move from, say, C to F, we take C, E, G, but the C can now stay the same. We've got an anchor point, while the rest does change. Okay? This sounds very powerful and stable. And is the most common type of chord progression there is. Moving in thirds, that's a weird one. Say we go from C to E minor. Now, if you remember this stuff about medians, then you already know what's going to happen. C to E minor has the smallest amount of change possible. We are sharing two notes, and the other note does change, obviously. So out of these 3 notes, one has to change a little bit, and that's it. It's the minimum amount of change necessary to go to a new chord, which creates a much more subtle and soft movement. These 3 different types of motion are illustrated perfectly in a song like On Love in Sadness by Jason Mraz. You might not know this song. It's old because I'm getting old, but it's a song that uses movement in thirds in the instrumental section, so the intro and the interlude being the instrumental section after the first chorus. And then it launches up in the verse with movement in seconds, immediately creating contrast between these 2 different types of motion. It starts with a lot of momentum. It's moving fast. It has a lot of drive behind it because it's moving in seconds. And when it finally launches into the chorus, you get this sort of sigh of relief, because now we're suddenly moving in fourths. And we got a lot more power, it's a lot more stable, and we got more attention for the melody and for the lyrics. And then we land up, and then we end up in the interlude again, moving in thirds. So these different sections of the song use different harmonic momentum. That's On Love and Sadness by Jason Mraz. Okay, we're going to practice some of this stuff. After the practice session, I'm going to give you guys some homework. As always, let's get to practicing. And every song that I mention will have a link in the description below, of course. Okay, now I want to look at what happens when we do voice lead the bass. Okay, so let's say we got a chord progression like C, G, A minor. And then moving to F would be the big cliche, but we're going to stick to this for now. Say we want to voice lead this. Well, maybe you've already calculated it in your head and maybe you still want to do that, but it's pretty simple. C to A. Which note lies in between C and A? It's B. Does the G chord contain the note B? Yeah, it does. It's the third, so we can just safely put that in the bass. And now the bass is playing C, B, A. Now this is a very common harmonic device. You would almost call it a cliche, except the word cliche sounds kind of negative, and I don't mean it negatively. You know, you could say a 4/4 time signature is a cliche. Everybody's using 4/4, so you're just not going to use it anymore. It's just a common rhythmic device, and this is a common harmonic device. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Generally, you would conceptualize this as 1, 5/3, 6. Another thing that makes this very common is that otherwise, if you want the note B in the bass, and we wouldn't want a G chord, well, there's not that many options. There's either B diminished, which is pretty dissonant and doesn't get used in pop songs all that much, or E minor over B. But E minor and C are very much alike. Only one note is changing, and that is the bass note. So it's like the bass note is moving down and everything else is just staying the same, which in my experience only happens when the melody is using the E. G has G, B, D, so generally what I see is you use E minor when E is featured in the melody. So when the melody requires you to use E minor, then you use E minor. But G over B is like the go-to answer. Now, because this harmonic device is so incredibly common, it's also used in a different spot in the scale or in the key. It's also used moving from 4 to 2, making this 1 over 3. But it's still the same thing. And we'll see this come back later in this lesson, but these are very common harmonic devices using slash chords. Another very common way to use slash chords, which does not require the bass to voice lead, at least not yet, would be this. I'm saying not yet because this is part of a larger chord progression and the bass would voice lead leading up to this point. But for now, we're just going to check this out because it's a very common device. This is 1 over 5, 5, 1. Although, you could look at it differently. You could say G is G, B, D. Now we want a chord that leads to G and then goes to C. We just want a chord that leads to G, that has G as a bass note. You could opt for C over G, but one typical answer might be G sus4. It's just G. All we're doing is moving this one note, C to B. That's all that's happening there. But we could expand on that motion by harmonizing this C. Harmonizing means picking notes that sound good with it. And so we can emphasize this C to B motion by harmonizing it using a third. Thirds generally sound good, which is why we use them for chords. Which means we would also turn this into an E, which then moves to D. Which means we would also move E to D, and having two notes move. And what we ended up doing here is creating this chord. So you could see it as C over G, or you could see it as G sus4, but it's actually G6 sus4, and you're removing the fifth, so a mid-5. But this is, like, would you rather read this or rather read that? I think you would rather read this one. So we don't notate this, even though it might function like that. I would urge you, if you start composing, to see if you can find a spot where you can use this cadence as well. That brings us to cadences. Now, 5 to 1 is a typical example of a perfect cadence. Cadence being a way for chords to move into each other, typically for tension to resolve. And this to this is sort of a 4 to 1, kind of, depending on which key we're in. And this would be called a plagal cadence. Perfect cadence and plagal cadence. The plagal cadence has a bit more of a church-like sound to it. This uses a plagal cadence moving to a perfect cadence. For now, that's not gonna mean anything to you, but we'll get back to perfect and cladle. I said cladle. We're gonna get back to perfect and plagal cadences throughout this course a few times. Okay, that was the entire explanation. Now we're going to get to practicing together, getting started with some notation. This is a voice leading exercise and you need to calculate some stuff. So we've got our Roman numerals here. We know which chords we're going to have. Apparently we're in the key of A major, right? I didn't put the accidentals at the start of the stuff. I want you to put the accidentals at each separate note while you're going through this exercise, just to keep you conscious of which notes are used. And you need to know which chords these are, and which inversions you're ending up in when you're trying to voice lead everything. Now remember, voice leading, it means a note stays the same if it can, and if it can't, then the note will move one semitone or maximum of one whole tone. Do not move any further than that using one single note. If you're moving up a minor third with one of these voices, it's not voice leading anymore. It's not subtle enough. It doesn't work. Okay, so maybe I did put you to work instead of practicing, but I'll show you how this works. Now in the key of A, we've got A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. You could just notate A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A and then add the accidentals, that's fine as well. But at least now I know which notes we've got. Now the fifth note is E, and it's a major chord, as you can see by the capitalized Roman numeral. The small one means we got a minor chord, it's F sharp minor. This is D major and this is A. Or we can just pick out from this scale which notes we've got. So it's E, G, and this would be B. That's what we've got here. So now we gotta move. The E can stay in place, right? That's just the same note, it doesn't have to go anywhere. So A could go down to G sharp or up to B. Like, where does A need to go? Well, we've also got C sharp. So moving C sharp down to B and A down to G, and the G sharp, that keeps us staying relatively in the same place, and this causes us to have the most subtle movement we can. This is a root position chord. Now we're going to move up. We're moving in seconds here. We know each note is going to change and each note is going to go up. So there's really not much you need to think about. C sharp, F sharp, and D. D contains the notes D, F sharp, and A. F sharp and A, we already got those, so we can just keep them. And the only other note we didn't voice lead yet is the C sharp, which of course has to go up to D. It's the only note we didn't notate yet. So this is another root position, and this is a first inversion. The fourth is at the top, so we got the root up at the top instead of at the bottom. It's the first inversion. Second inversion places the fourth at the bottom. Okay, now we just need to voice lead this back to an A chord and we are done. How we're going to do it? Well, let's look at the note they're sharing first. D and A both have the note A. D, F sharp A, and A, C sharp E. So A will stay in place. We've got one note above A and one note below A. Well, the one below has to be E and the one above has to be C sharp. I mean, if we take 1, 3, 5 and we double it and we wonder, well, which note is above 1, and which is below? Well, with the 1 in the middle, you end up with a 5, 1, 3 chord inversion. So that's second inversion. And this is how you would do this. Okay, we've notated some stuff. Time to use our ears and to use our understanding of the piano to figure out what's going on in a song. Let's get to it. Okay, we're gonna start at C major. You can see I'm playing second inversion here, taking the root position, moving the first note up to create first inversion, moving the lowest note up to the top, creating second inversion. But I'm still using the root as a bass note. And these concepts can get confused with each other. Just because I'm using an inversion here doesn't mean I have to use one here, right? I can go from C to F, going from C second inversion to F first inversion. And this lets me stay in one place, even though the bass is moving from root to root. Okay, so that's how that usually works. Now, we're going to take a look at a song. I'm not going to tell you which one just yet. We're going to see if you can recognize it. First, we're going to apply some logic to see how this was created. So, first we got C. Now, what we want to do in this song is descend with the bass until we reach 2, and then we're going to play 2, 5, 1 for a reason we'll get into a few lessons later. But we're going to end up at 2. So, which chord are we going to pick? Like on the first note, that's just the tonic. And it's going to be the root of the tonic chord. So fine. But what are we going to do here? Well, we could just... But that's not pretty. But that's not pretty. And it already starts here. I mean, do you feel invited to sing a pretty melody when I'm playing this? So we're going to take a different chord, and we saw this earlier when you got the 7th of the scale, or the 7th of the key as a bass note. Generally you don't use the diminished chord, but you use this as the 3rd of the 5 chord, playing G major. Now we already have B here, so I'm going to leave it out here to play this more open voicing. That's voicings. See, the chord is G, B and D. The voicing is how do I arrange those G's, B's and D's over the piano or over the orchestra or on your guitar or whichever way. So this is the voicing I'm going to play. So we got C, G over B. Now we're going to move down to A. We could just play A minor and it will be fine. However, in the case of this song, the composer wanted to keep a little bit of tension. And what if we do this? That note, it creates some tension in relation to the bass note. It really wants to go somewhere. However, the chord we're actually playing is F major. It's just a 4 chord. Just 1, 4, 5. Those are the 3 typical chords that are used most commonly and that are easiest to listen to, so to speak. So we're moving from C to G, the 5, to F, the 4. And from here, we're going to use the plagal cadence. There it is, the churchly cadence, moving from 4 to 1. Also, this creates a more interesting chord. We could move from F to G. And this is very resolved, but moving from F to C has a bit more tension because the bass note is not the root. So there's this discrepancy between the bass and the chord that's played over it. It's not too much, it doesn't sound really dissonant or anything, but there is some tension going on there. Okay, so we got C, G over B, F over A, C over G. Then we'll just play F, because there's no other option. We just play E, or well, there's no other option if we want to use 1, 4 and 5. And the same thing goes for the next chord. With E in the bass, if you only want to use 1, 4 and 5, only one chord is the only chord that has E. F has F, A, C, G has G, B, D, there's no E in there. So those chords are sort of self-explanatory. And then we're just going to move from the 2 to the 5 to the 1. And then we got Piano Man by Billy Joel. Well, and so on and so forth. And we're done practicing. It's time for you to get to work. Okay, for the first homework assignment, I'm going to notate some numbers, Roman numerals and stuff, harmonic analysis. I'm going to ask you to tell me which chords those indicate in certain keys. I'm going to write it down right now. Give me a second. Okay, these are the numbers. We're going to calculate it in the key of D major and the key of A flat major. Up to you to calculate it. We'll get back to it after I've given you all the assignments. Okay, for this assignment, I'm going to give you some chords and you have to do the harmonic analysis of those chords. Let's do it. And to be clear, no, I'm not telling you which key we're in. You're going to have to figure that out by yourself. This is the chord progression. Let me know what the harmonic analysis is. So to be clear, harmonic analysis is when you use the Roman numerals to tell me which chords they are or what their bass notes are. Okay, good luck. Okay, so next homework assignment, I already wrote it down for you, except this time, sometimes you know the Roman numeral that we're attaching to the chord, and sometimes you know the chord. And in one case, I also gave you the chord inversion that you're using there. Use all this information to figure out what the voice leading should be. It's a lot of calculation, but once you're through with this, you know how to voice lead. I will get to the answers later. Okay, we're going to figure out Take Me to Church by Hozier. Okay, now there are a lot of chords, there's a lot we're going to be figuring out. I'm going to play each section once, just small sections that you need to figure out. You can do it completely by ear, but if you're going to use your instrument for it, I'm not going to blame you, it's fine. However, if if you got this, if you're confident, do it without your instrument. Just notate the numbers. Just, this is a tonic over a third or whatever. Just that notation. But if you do use your instrument, it's fine. Try and figure out what these chords are. By the way, listen to the bass notes and to the root notes. And then try and hear if it's a major or a minor chord. Because it doesn't stick neatly into the major scale throughout the entire song. There's going to be some variation here. We'll get to that in later lessons, don't worry, it's not going to be much. It's a bit of a challenge to your ears. Okay, first part. There it starts over, okay? That's it. Just rewind the video for a second, try and hear what those chords are. We are starting on a minor chord. and you haven't learned minor keys yet, so assume that it's either 2, 3 or 6. Try and hear the bass notes, figure out what the intervals are between the bass notes, sing it, and we'll get to that once we answer everything. Now we're just going to do the pre-chorus, that's the only other section, and I'll just launch it into the chorus, but we're not going to do the actual chorus, just so you have some context, so you know which part of the song we're in. So, here we go, figure out this pre-chorus. Okay, so you know where we are, right? Figure out that little pre-chorus and we'll get back to it after the assignments. Alright, I had to set the camera up so you can see which notes I'm playing. We're gonna do another song because figuring things out by ear is really hard and it requires a lot of practice. So we're just gonna do it. I'm not a pianist, nowhere near one, so I'll do my best. This song uses inversions, it changes the bass notes here and there. It's a major song, and it's Don't Wanna Miss a Thing by Aerosmith. We're gonna figure it out right now. Pre-chorus coming up. Okay, that was a lot. I know it was a lot. You've got the video, just rewind it, listen to it as often as you need to so your ears can latch onto the sounds, latch onto the bass notes, the root notes, and notate it for yourself. Again, I'm not giving you a key, and that's not a coincidence. I'm not giving you a key because I want you to think in numbers. Figure it out by ear without knowing the key. Is it 1, the tonic? Is it the 2 chord with the 3rd in the bass? Like, what's going on? In numbers. Okay, next assignment. It's important to play inversions on your instrument. Play around with them. Be playful. Explore. It's important to keep this childlike aspect of your musicianship alive while you're still learning everything. I consider it good practice to go 50-50. 50% to the craft, you know, practicing techniques, practicing your scales, getting better at calculation, all this stuff, and 50% just playfulness, exploration, just this childlike joy, and that's the art aspect. So I've got craft and art, and I want you to go 50-50 on them. And it's especially important now that we're going to the very last assignment. Compose. Of course you need to compose. We're doing this in every lesson so far. You're gonna need chords and melody. They need to come together. There has to be a main character and a scene. A scene without a character is meaningless, just like the character without the scene. It's the interplay between the two that creates meaning. Somebody crying is not as interesting as somebody crying at their wedding holding their husband or something. Or as somebody crying on their knees face down in the dirt in the rain. Like the scene does a lot to add to what's actually going on with this character. You need the interplay between both. Just the melody is meaningless, and just chords is meaningless. Of course, I'm painting a very black and white picture here, but for now this is what you should learn, to couple those two things. And then in the future, if you want to separate them to create an effect, fine, do your thing. It's art, you can do whatever you want. But for now, practice getting both of them together. Melody and chords. And of course, play around with inversions, with different bass notes. See if you can do something with harmonic momentum and with harmonic rhythm. Play around with those concepts. Write songs. Write little 8-measure sections of songs. That's all you need to do. An 8-measure verse, an 8-measure chorus. See what you can come up with. Try and create contrast using these things to get more fluent at music. And always create something you enjoy. It's useless if you're going to create something that you don't enjoy. It's going to be lifeless, soulless, just some school assignment that you didn't even really want to do. That's missing the point entirely. You need to learn how to create something you like. That's how you put yourself in the music. You need to make something you like. So the challenge is make something you like, while applying the concepts we're learning in this lesson, while applying harmonic momentum, harmonic rhythm, inversions, different bass notes, using melody and chords together. Try and make something you enjoy using all that stuff. This is vital for your relationship with harmony and music theory and music in general, and I would say even for your relationship with yourself. To be able to do something you enjoy that's also useful, you can actually combine these things, and it will be a shame if you didn't do it. Okay, let's start answering those assignments. This is the first one we ended up with. I'm going to tell you how I got to my answer. In the key of D, obviously the one chord is D. It's going to be D everywhere. Except D consists of D, F sharp, A. So when we've got the third in the bass, that's F sharp. And the fifth in the bass, that's A. The 5 is A. That's great. We already have A covered. And here we need the fifth of A in the bass, we end up with E. A, B, C, D, E. A, B, C, D, E, right? And you do need to apply accidentals when you do this simple type of calculation, but it works for now. All we need now is 4, that's going to be G. If F sharp is the third, after F comes G. So we've got G here, and we've got G here. The fifth of G is D. It has to be that way. This is again complementary intervals. We are in D, moving up to the 4. So we move up a fourth. And now we're going to go up a fifth. That's the same as going down a fourth, right? Apparently, because both answers end us up on D. Now, I'm not going to take you through the whole process for A flat. I'm just going to write the thing down and then you can check it for yourself. And these are the answers in the key of A flat. Check them for yourself. We're going to move on in 3, 2, 1. Alright, time to figure out the harmonic analysis to these chords. Now we've got a D major and an E major. D and E major. I'm interested in that because they're right next to each other. And in which place in the key or in the scale do we have two major chords right next to each other? That's the 4th and 5th. The 4 chord and the 5 chord. So this must be 4 and this must be 5. Each has a weird bass note, so we're going to notate that. E, F, G, that's the 3rd, and D, E, F, G, A, that's the 5th, meaning this is 1. Making this 6, this is 1 over 5, that's the 5, and that's the 1. Let me know in the comments below if you got all the calculation exercises right. I hope you did, and if not, maybe I can help you. Okay, so let's check what happened here. C minor is the 6th chord. The 2 is F minor, 5 is B flat, G minor is the 3rd, the 6 we already know this, that's C minor. We also already know what F minor is, it's the 2, and B flat is the 5. So we're practically done there. Now E flat and C minor, we're gonna draw out the entire scale, or we're gonna notate the entire scale for a second, just so we can talk about it a bit more easily. E flat has E flat, G, B flat. C minor has C, E flat, G. They're sharing E flat and G, right? So we can just keep those notes, E flat and G, and you move the B flat up to C. And this is a first inversion chord because the root is at the top. We've got the 4th here indicating where the root is. F minor in root position, that's actually an 8. I actually helped you guys figure out the chord. C has to stay, and then you just latch on the rest of the notes below. B flat and F minor share the note F. So again, we got the bottom note this time, and there are 2 notes on top of it. So we just need to fill in what the rest of the inversion would be. So this is the 5th. We're gonna add the root and the 3rd. Don't forget to flatten the root, or you got the wrong type of chord. Moving. Oh, and this is a second inversion because it's the 4th is at the bottom, the root is in the middle. G minor and B flat are actually very much alike. We got G, B flat, D. I'm not going to go through all of it with each chord because I think it should be relatively clear by now. We're moving through a bunch of chords and we're moving as subtly as possible, using voice leading, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. Let me know in the comments if you made it through this exercise. Okay, so first part. Da, to do it an octave higher, this is the root of this chord, moving up to this root and then moving down. Na, 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 na. So this is sort of a 1-4-1, except we're on minor chords, so we still need to put this into context. 1-4-1-4-1-4. And the difficult thing about this song was which chord is going to be the tonic. And this is the only major chord we've got in this section, so you kind of have to assume that this is the tonic for now. Even though, once we've learned minor keys, you will figure out that this first chord we started on, that was the actual tonic. But for now, let's calculate it, imagining this was the tonic. So, na, na, so this is 1, this is 1, then na, is 2, 1, 1, 7, 6. So this was 6, 2, 6, 2, 6, 2, 1, 2, 6. So this is the A section. Let's take a look at the pre-chorus, the B section. That was sneaky. So what's happening there with the root, it's da, 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 and even when the chords change, da, 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 da. But there are two details you hopefully picked up on, and maybe you missed it, that's fine as well. The first one is the very first time I did this, the bass note didn't change. It was ba, ba. It's almost too low for me. Ba, ba. Well, anyway, da, da, but the roots do change. Da, da. So if this is 1, and we've got this bass note, while this is the 1, that's 1, 7, 6, 5. It's a chord with the 5th in the bass. Na, na. And it sounds like this is the place of resolution, it's not the tension. So we're not going from 1 to 5, but we're going from 4 to 1, because this chord feels like the breath out, the release of tension. So we started out doing this, followed up by this, followed up by, what's that? It's still na, na, but na, but now we don't have na, 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 na. We got na, 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 na. There's 1, 2, flat third. It's a minor chord. Maybe you picked up on it, maybe you didn't. Maybe you picked up on it based on the color of the sound, instead of actually singing the individual notes. That's fine as well. But it was a minor chord. The 4 chord was turned minor. And then again it was turned minor. Okay, one more thing. This song is called Take Me to Church. And what are we using? Plagal cadence. The church-like cadence, right? Going from 4 to 1, from 4 to 1. Here again, this is kind of in a minor key. This would be 1, 4. It's the same distance, and while figuring out the chords I touched on this, but the whole song up until this point is using this plagal cadence constantly, and it's called Take Me to Church. That can't be a coincidence, can it? Okay, this was a big one. We're gonna go through it step by step, okay? First, the 1 chord. I just started on the tonic, which happens a lot in pop music. The bass is descending. We talked about this motion earlier in this lesson. It's 1 moving to the 5 chord with the 3rd in the bass. Then moving to the 6th chord. It's na, 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 na. I'm singing 1, 3, 5, 3, 1 from this chord. And those are the bass notes. 1 going to 7, which is the 3rd of the 5 chord. Going to 6. We'll notate it in a second. Okay? I'll notate it. Then we did the same thing going from the 4 chord down in the exact same way like I showed you earlier in this lesson. Da, that's da, but it's not just descending chords, that will be, it's not this, it's this. It's a subtle difference, I know, but there is a difference. This note, instead of this sounds a bit more stable, but also sadder because it's a minor chord, but also a bit more stable because it's a root position. But we used the more tense first inversion, and now we've got the 1 chord over the 3rd. Okay. Then we ended up at the pre-chorus. Now, we already used movement in fourths, while the bass was moving in seconds. In the pre-chorus, the chords are moving in seconds. Going from 3 up to 4, up to 5. If you picked up on it, I used a sus4 descending, a sus4 resolving to major. Okay, another interesting thing here is the 3rd. The 3 chord. Where does the 3 chord want to go? It wants to go to the subdominant. So it's either 2 or 4. This is where it went. And so we want to go to the subdominant, then subdominant, then dominant, to eventually land us in the chorus on the tonic. Right? And then again it descends, but this time it doesn't go all the way down to 6. This time it throws you a curveball. It goes up to the 2 chord. 2 chord, moving up even further to 4, 5, 1. Now how did it move up further? That was the 1 over the 3rd. Here's the bass note, here's the root. Okay. This was difficult to figure out by ear, or maybe it's not to you, but if you had trouble with this, it's okay. It was a pretty difficult assignment. I'm going to notate all of it and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Okay, let's notate all of these chords. We've had the verse. The verse, the A section, whatever you want to call it. Now, first I'm going to draw the measures, so each measure is roughly equal in size. We started on the 1. We've had da, 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 da. So that's 2 chords in 1 measure and then 1 chord in 2 measure. This was 1, 5 over 3 and then 6. Then we copy and pasted this pattern, except we didn't start on the tonic, but we started on the subdominant, moving all the way up to 4. And then descending in the exact same fashion. Now that you can see that based on the numbers, you can kind of calculate it, but we'll get to it in a second when I'm going to translate this to chords. This was played twice. You can notate that. You repeat everything in between those lines. That's what they mean. Pre-chorus only had 2 measures. That's an effective pre-chorus. Short and sweet, building up tension, they land to the chorus and get to the chorus as fast as possible. It works. It just gets us, it helps us maintain our attention and keep that for where it matters. So, what do we do here? We moved from 3 to 4 to 5. If you want to notate the sus motion, that was 5 sus 4, going to 5. In the chorus, we started on 1. We did the same thing we did in the verse. And because of that, we expected this, but we were surprised by the 2 chord. And this 1 over 3 got smashed in between, but this helps us voice lead from 2 to 4, which is why I played that. And then we go to 5. The funny thing about this song is that's 3 measures, not 2, not 4, not an even number like you would expect. It's 3 measures and then it repeats. Don't want to close my eyes, don't want to fall asleep cause I'd miss you, babe. And I don't want to miss a thing, cause even when I dream of you, the sweetest we could never do cause I'd miss you, babe. And I don't want to miss a thing. It has a rhythmic tension there. So, one thing I want to point out, here we're using a different harmonic momentum. And we use that to create contrast. So that's what's happening there. We've sandwiching, so we've got movement in fourths and seconds fourths and seconds, but here's just flat seconds, just one, up, up, just moving it up. We're in the key of D. Figure out the chords for yourself, and I'll get back to it in 3, 2, 1. D, that means this is A over C sharp, that means this is B minor. Now doing the same thing, but we're starting on G. Imagine you would do this in the key of G. What would you end up on? Well, you would end up with G, D over F sharp, E minor. It's the same movement. If you're going to play it on your instrument, you're going to notice it. It's the same kind of thing, except starting and ending in a different place in the scale or in the key. Okay, let's go here. That's F sharp minor, going to G, going to A. If you want to notate it, it's A sus4 moving to A. And then here we got D, E over C sharp moving to E minor instead of B minor. We're surprised by the E minor. Got this little D over F sharp sandwich in between the voice lead from E to F sharp to G and back up and up to A to eventually land back down on D. This is the entire thing. Now remember, we're not doing all of this in order for you to be challenged and then do it right and then you're done and you've learned it. That's not how that works. Your brain needs to make mistakes. It's trying to latch onto these sounds and identify what they are. And because your brain is making mistakes and because I'm pointing at those mistakes, that's the reason your brain can adjust itself so that in the future your brain will latch onto the right sounds and the right concepts and couple those in a way that works. So don't be afraid if you're making mistakes. It's fine. We just need to practice. Just keep exposing your ears to music, to chords, to bass notes, to root notes. Keep number singing. Try and figure out what you're hearing. And the more you're doing this, the better you'll get at it. And last but not least, share your compositions or your improvisations for that matter with us in the comments. You share a link or something, but let us give each other feedback so we can all grow and learn together. That would be the most beautiful thing we could do with these lessons. Share your compositions. It's great for you because you get instant feedback, you get gratification, you get tips for how to improve maybe. And it's great for all of us because we can see an active community developing, and that would be amazing to watch happen. Okay, I'm too old for this. Recap. We've got inverted intervals are considered complementary if you can invert them into each other, and especially we're interested in the fourth and fifth because they're useful for identifying the roots of triads when they're notated. Then we've got chord inversions. You got root position and there's first and second inversion. First inversion has the root at the top. Second inversion has the root in the middle. You got the third at the top. So those are chord inversions, complementary intervals. Then there's bass notes and slash chords. You can call these slash chords. When you play like C over E or C over G, that could be a 1 over 3. Just as well be a 4 over the 5th. Remember that the Roman numerals are for chords and the Arabic numerals are for notes. And then there's harmonic rhythm. So that could be 1 per measure or one per beat. Or that could be 4 per measure. So that's the same thing in a 4/4 time signature, but it's not the same thing in a 6/8 time signature, for example. It could be 1 per 4 measures. There are all different kinds of harmonic rhythm. You play around with it, and there's harmonic momentum. That's movement in seconds, in thirds, and in fourths. Remember that this is the most momentum. Ironically, this is the most subtle. This is the most powerful and stable. That's a recap. Any questions you can also just ask in the comments below. This is a lot and I urge you to take your time and go step by step. All these concepts are worth investigating and integrating into the craftsmanship aspect of your musicianship and the childlike exploration, the artistic aspect of your musicianship. And if you can't get enough just yet and would like to learn a little bit more, check out my other videos, and if you don't want to miss out next week's video, subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you next time, and now go make some music!